Talks between Iran and the United States to secure a 2015 nuclear pact have begun in Qatar. The pact had imposed curbs on Iran's nuclear activities in return for the lifting of international sanctions.
These talks marks a change in approach after nearly a year of discussions ground to a halt in Vienna. The venue has shifted to the Gulf region, and the talks themselves have been scaled down to indirect discussions between the U.S. and Iran. Since then, U.S. President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the accord 4 years ago. Iran has stepped up its enrichment of uranium.
I confirm that there has been an agreement in content and form, but it remains to be seen whether the U.S. government can, according to the plan, stop following the Trump administration's policies practically and concretely and become the responsible party. Iran has pledged to participate in the talks and try to resolve the remaining issues of the previous negotiations in the shortest possible time.
EU diplomats are expected to shuttle between the two sides. The move follows an unexpected visit by the EU foreign policy chief to Tehran on Saturday. He said it was time to finalize a deal.
Iranian academic from Tehran University, Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, is an advisor to the Iranian delegation on the matter. He joins us now to talk about this. Very good evening to you. Good to have you with us once again. So what can you tell us about the talks at the moment as they stand?
Well, as you know, the talks in Vienna ended without a conclusion. Most of the issues were resolved, but a number of key issues remained. Issues concerning the sanctions list and also issues concerning assurances, because the Iranians need assurances that the United States won't be able to just simply pull out of the deal and get away with it without consequences. So a lot of the issues, as I said, have been resolved, but a number of key issues in these two particular fields remain. Over the last 3 months, there were exchanges of messages on 2 occasions. As you know, European delegations, EU delegations came to Iran, the last being Joseph Borrell, who came, and the talks led to the current discussions that are taking place as we speak. Obviously, the Europeans and the United States need a deal because of their war in Ukraine and the economic crisis that it's creating for Europe in particular, but also the United States. They need to bring down the costs of energy. And of course, Iran is a major energy producer. And as you know, yesterday in a conversation that was heard between the French president and Biden, the French president said that the Saudis, the Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates effectively don't have any excess capacity. So that basically means that the United States and the Europeans need very much for the Iranians to have a larger role in exporting fuel. And of course, there's the fact that because of the escalation that Western countries brought about with the International Atomic Energy Agency and Iran's response to that escalation, the Europeans feel that they're not, and the Americans feel that they're not really in a very strong position with regards to monitoring of Iran's peaceful nuclear program. So the pressure is building on Europe and the United States, and but we'll have to see if the United States has the political will to agree to very reasonable demands that Iran has for the implementation of the nuclear deal.
Given the fuel and energy crisis that is underway as a result of the conflict in Europe, has the posture changed, particularly from the side of the United States towards Iran, as you mentioned, given the options that are being sought? Is there a softer tone that is applicable now?
Well, the tone in Europe has shifted dramatically Joseph Borrell, when he came to Iran, he effectively said repeatedly that Europe needs a deal. They were saying that because of the war in Ukraine, we need a deal. And that shows how, I don't want to use the word desperate, but that shows how dire the situation is economically for the EU. And of course, the French government, the French president, said he also wants to see Iranian fuel on the market, on the global market. That also shows that they are not in a strong position. Of course, Iran is selling all of its oil. All of the oil that it does produce is being sold. Iran doesn't have enough oil for its customers as we speak. But of course, if the JCPOA is implemented and implemented correctly, then Iran will be able to export more oil and produce more oil for larger exports. So the Europeans are in a very difficult situation. Iran, as I said, is in a much stronger position than before because Iran's oil is being sold. It's being sold at a very high price. The Russians have basically, for years, the Iranians have been approaching the Russians to improve relations. Now the Russians are, it's the other way around. The Russians are very keen on improving relations with Iran, and especially in developing the north-south corridor where Russian imports and exports would go through Iran to the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. So Russia's tilted towards Iran. China is increasingly moving towards Iran because of the global situation. And we see how the Europeans want very much to have better relations with Iran as well, as through the points that I mentioned about Joseph Borrell and the French president. But of course, we have to see what Washington does. The United States has Biden has a very difficult internal situation. He's very unpopular. The midterm elections are approaching. His opponents are hammering him, and he may feel that giving ground in order to reach a deal may cost him at home. And I think that the focus of attention for the U.S. government is internal politics. Of course, it would be the smart thing to do for the Americans would be to sign on to the deal, because it would bring down the price of gasoline to a degree.
So the information that we have is that the concessions made by Iran at this point is that it is willing to, drop its demand on the removal of the IRGC's FTO sanctions, but it's still negotiating on two other issues, one of them including sanctions. Are you able to expand a little bit more on this?
Well, that is a myth that has been produced and has been repeated many times. The removal of the IRGC from the FTO, the U.S. Foreign Terrorist Organization list, was never a precondition. When I was in Vienna with the team, and afterwards during the past few months, I've said this repeatedly, I've tweeted this repeatedly, people can check my Twitter account, I've said it many times, it's never been a precondition. There are multiple, and the Iranians, if the Americans don't remove the Revolutionary Guards from the FTO, the Foreign Terrorist Organization list, the Iranians won't remove the U.S. Armed Forces, CENTCOM, which is the base of the U.S. Armed Forces in the Persian Gulf region in West Asia. Iran won't remove them from their terrorist list either. So it's not going to benefit the United States, this sort of standoff. But for Iran, the key issue is not the FTO. The key issue is assurances. There are three basic issues that were important for Iran. One is sequencing, and that after 2015, when the Iranians implemented the nuclear deal, the Americans didn't. And so this time around, the Iranians are saying, look, every step of the way, you have to take a step, so that we know this time around you implement the deal. So the Americans will have to take a step, then the Iranians will take a step. The Americans take another step, and the Iranians will take another step. This part of the negotiations, I think, are more or less over. There are not any major problems there. So there are two other fields that are left. One is assurances. The Iranians want assurances that if the Americans leave the deal again, as the Americans did under Trump, that they just can't simply get away with it, that there will be repercussions. And there has been progress in that field, but not enough. This does not have to do with the next administration. This has to do with the current Biden administration. The Biden administration did not want to give assurances, and the Iranians said, then there's no deal. So the Biden team, the Biden regime, has given ground, but not enough. So that's the second issue. And this is basically because of what the U.S. did in the past. And the third issue is the sanctions regime. The United States is still trying to keep as many individuals and entities and bodies, organizations on the sanctions list as possible. And for Iran, that is itself a violation of the deal, because according to the deal, Iran should be able to normalize its economic trade with the international community. And the United States not only should not impede it, but should, according to the deal, facilitate it. So the differences as we speak, the key differences are with regards to assurances and also with regards to the sanctions regime.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. It was a pleasure. Tehran University Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, who is an advisor to the Iranian delegation on the matter that is the nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. The talks taking place in Qatar, but as you heard him say, that there are no direct talks at the moment, that Europe is playing go-between between the parties.